And without need of introduction, I will still say he will be speaking with Maurice Lévy. Welcome.
Merci. Thank you, Spencer. Eric, I'm so glad that you are with us. I'm so happy because you are a true friend of France. You are a true friend of the startup community, and you are a true personal friend. So I'm so happy to welcome you and to share this moment with you. I will try to get something that you don't like to share, some personal views about yourself, some aspects that you keep secrets in yourself. So I will start by first thanking you for what you have done for Google. I'm not a shareholder of Google, that's too bad. I should have invested all my savings. I would have been extremely rich today. But you have been the CEO for, I believe, 10 years. You have invented the business model. You have created the infrastructure. You have thought of all the organization, and then you became the executive chairman. And you will soon tell us what you are doing, because I don't understand. You said I'm stepping down and you are still at the office. You said I'm not working anymore and you are still technical advisor. You said I will be retiring, but you are still working very hard. So the first thing that I'd like to ask you before we go there is all these years with Google, after a formidable adventure with Sun, what has been the most difficult issues you had to deal with? What have been the most rewarding one? And what are you the most proud of?
You know, the best thing that you can do in life is have strong friends and build institutions. And I've had the privilege of being your close friend for more than a decade. And when I look today at what you've done in terms of the largest tech conference in Europe today, the achievements here in France with respect to the internet, the sense of drive and entrepreneurship here in France, when we started 10 years ago, this was your goal, but it's now been achieved. And so in life, if I can say one thing to all of you, make sure the things you're doing are things which will scale and work with smart partners. And I've had the privilege of doing that with you. I think the hardest thing now is to do things quickly enough. Because it used to be that you could sit here in France and have your own industry, your own products. People here remember the Minitel, a good but very old product from 20 years ago. Today you wouldn't do the Minitel, you would do a global Minitel if you were to do it. So the hardest problem is the lack of time. And I used to think that I had little time when I worked at Sun in terms of getting an idea to market. Now you have no time. And that's the hardest thing, I think, of all.
So before moving to the question, I would like also to thank you, because you supported VivaTech from day one. Not only you have been one of the key platinum partners, but you did something which was extremely difficult to get, which was to have the Google car flying over to Paris. Never left the US, and the first stop was in Paris. So thank you.
Yeah, and I should say that I'm very proud of our commitment, Google's commitment to France. We have many, many hundreds of employees here. We started off with a sales operation. We now have a large engineering center. We've just announced the creation of a series of AI centers. So I can tell you that we are very, very strongly committed to expansion in France and in Europe, and also in the United Kingdom. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and I'm very proud to be associated with that.
So before us, we had on stage Yann Lequin from Facebook, and before Yann, we had David Kenny. Both have spoken a lot about AI. and AI is front and center of everything today. Maybe you can start by explaining to the vast audience what is the difference between AI and machine learning. Can you tell us, as if we were age of 6, what is the difference?
So the terms are generally used interchangeably, but a simple way to think about it is that machine learning is how the system looks at complex sets of data and learns from the data, very straightforward. And AI is the way it's expressed. It's how you actually see it. So we think of it as human-like experience and intelligence, but what's really happened is the machine has learned from patterns. Most of the artificial intelligence and machine learning that you use today is relatively straightforward. It's Google Photos, it's Google Translate. Now these are powerful tools, but there are many people who believe that the next generation of algorithms will be much, much more powerful. But I think for this audience, most of what you hear is relatively straightforward, so-called narrow AI, where we're using primarily vision to solve interesting problems. Where does vision matter? Self-driving cars. Where does vision matter? Medicine, things like that.
So when it comes to your new job, technical advisor, I don't know what that does mean. AI, I think they are interrelated. And maybe you can tell us a little bit on what you are working today and what are the kind of projects that you are leading at Google, because he is still working and people who believe that he has retired, I think that they don't know Eric. Eric doesn't know the spelling of retirement.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, neither you nor I can stop. This is so interesting. So there is a renaissance, right? Something the French understand very well, in young people and new ideas applying new mathematical techniques to solve problems in new ways. And as a programmer, the easiest way to think about it is that when I was programming, I had to write down precisely what the computer had to do. And that's how most of what you use is today. It's called algorithmic. It's step A, step B, step C. But the new model is, instead of writing down the rule, you learn the rule. In other words, you train. And you do this in situations where there's a great deal of data. So what's an example of something where there's a great deal of data? Where there's lots of humans, there's lots of biology, there's lots of traffic, right? There's lots of language. So the early wins are in vision, speech, language understanding, things that like traffic and medical scanning, radiology, pathology, x-rays, MRIs, all of those things. They go into systems that produce results that are better than what humans can do. The next renaissance is, once that's in place, how much can we understand about how they interrelate, right? So a typical example would be you're trying to predict something is going to happen. Let's say you're looking at all of social media. Well, you can't read all of social media yourself. There's just too much of it. But maybe a computer can read all of social media and predict something, give you an alert, something you're worried about, something you hope for. Those are examples where the algorithmic possibility is not clear, but you can teach it to tell you what's interesting.
Don't you think that if everything which is on social media is read by a computer and analyzed by artificial intelligence program, we may miss some important aspect and some sensitive issues and maybe make the wrong decision?
Well, it's important to say about artificial intelligence is that at the moment it has too many errors to fly the airplane, okay? So it's fine for the AI to advise the pilot, but you do not want AI flying your airplane. Too many errors, too many false positives. Now, over time, these errors will become smaller and eventually perhaps zero. And the other problem with the systems we're talking about is in the big language and learning models, they can't exactly tell you how they learned something. So the example is you've got a car, and the car makes a wrong turn, and the car is self-driving. And so the accident board says to the car, how did you learn this? And the car truthfully says, I don't know how I learned that, because they learn it in a different way. Now, again, there are people working on this problem. But until we have real accuracy, AI and machine learning need to be advisory, advice to you. So I like to think of it not as a replacement of humans, which I don't think it will be at all, but rather as making you smarter. So today, Google makes you smarter, right? You use Google and you know more than you did before because you can look things up. It makes you smarter. Well, over time, the AI will make you smarter, but it's still you. I don't think you'll miss things because of it.
If you look at the AI planet, and you look at this AI planet based on the investment which are made today, we believe, based on the information that we have, is that the first investor is China, the second is the US, and in China it's the very large corp. In the US it's also the very large platforms, you, Facebook, name it, and there is two questions behind this. The first one is, will AI be a game between US and China only? And second, will AI be a game which will be dominated only by large platforms, and that the small startups will not have any access to the best part of AI and building some great operations?
So a couple of things for you all to know is that China and the US are clearly the 1 and 2. Number 3 is Britain. Number 4 is France. So with
a big gap.
Not that big a gap. The French are very smart, right? They really are.
Jan?
Right. So, and we have a situation now where the top US companies are all creating large AI labs here in France. So I think the first message is that there's a very good chance France will be a very significant global player. If you look at China, China has made AI a national priority. They're changing their university systems, and they have a national plan to catch up by 2020 and to dominate, that is, to lead in every aspect of AI by 2030. That's China. In the United States, the leading companies are investing a massive amount of money. We have just announced our own AI center here, both within what is called Google Brain, and then also with a group called DeepMind, has a Paris operation as well for the same reasons. And we've done a partnership with the Polytechnic with more to come. I'm sure that Jan and his team are doing similar things. I'm sure that other companies are doing the same. So the good news is at least the 4 countries are going to participate in this revolution well. We believe that this technology should be available to everyone and not just the rich people, the rich companies, and the rich countries. So we have a plan, we, Google, have a plan to give our technology away, most recently a library called TensorFlow. Tensors are the objects that are multiplied in the AI learning mechanism, and we have released TensorFlow and many updates to it in the last year, and everyone is using this. So we can say that every startup in AI is using TensorFlow in some way, and we think that's wonderful, even if they're a competitor to what we're doing.
And you believe that small startups can really find their way on AI?
Well, more importantly, small startups are almost all working on AI. So the biggest area of startups is, in fact, in the medical area, because the medical area is exactly the kind of thing that we're interested in. There's an awful lot of data, there's a lot of money, it's really important, and it's to advise physicians and advise nurses, right? So we have major programs in this area. There are many, many startups. The classic startup is a startup that's trying to use new techniques to cure or diagnose cancer, new techniques to discover drugs, new techniques to look at optometry, new techniques to ophthalmology, new techniques to look at your skin, dermatology, things like this. And these are businesses that are likely to become very large. The medical care industry globally is immense. Here in Paris, in France, the medical industry is plus more than 10% of the GDP. In the United States, it's 18% of the GDP of the country. These are massive industries. So I think you're going to see almost every startup, in fact, I'll say every startup that's going to be successful will use AI in some form.
Do you believe that with AI we will be able, if we were an African country, to solve some of our problems? We have decided to put Africa as a guest of honor at VivaTech because we believe that there is, even in Africa, a lot of good startups, good innovators, great entrepreneurs. And when we discuss with all the people who have been there and all the people who are leading this field in Africa, they are all eager to try to find solutions for their own country. So do you believe that AI can solve issues like, okay, how to get the right level of water, how to nurture all the people, how to find ways to have a better level of living, of feeding the people, curing the people, which are the massive problems that they have to face?
I wish I could say yes, but I think that AI is not going to be the primary solution in Africa. So we just did a review a couple of days ago in detail of what's going on in Africa. 57 countries, average growth in Africa about 1 point higher than the rest of the world, huge supply of young people, demographics, very weak countries in terms of taxation, economics, power, fair amount of terrorism problems, and so forth. It's going to be very difficult for Africa to do much until they establish some basic things, the ability to get electric power and full connectivity. The connectivity is pretty good now, and we are working hard to have very inexpensive smartphones. So to the degree that these solutions come to Africa, they'll be only smartphone-based, and there'll be wide variation in the countries. Some countries will lag for a very long time. Some countries will be much more advanced. Kenya, for example, is doing very well. Many people think that Nigeria can do really well because of its scale, size, and growth, right, et cetera.
We are not leaving the field of AI, but we cannot avoid to speak about something which is happening today. Today, I don't know why they have decided that it will be the 25th of May. Strange idea, but the 25th of May is the day of GDPR. How this is going to affect your business? Because it's a lot based on data and access to personal data, how to target the people, get to know them better, to profile them, and you cannot profile people without having access to a lot of information. And there are two questions which are led to this, which are linked to this. The first one is how Google is affected and its business by GDPR, and the second is how AI, if AI as a role, can help solving the issue of privacy.
So on the second question, there's a temptation to think that AI can solve every problem, but the AI that I'm talking about is using large amounts of data to train models that produce intelligence services that humans use. So in that sense, as long as that data is available, you can build solutions that can give humans advice. So that means, for example, that you could watch for violations, right, of privacy under the GDPR better with AI, because you could have a lot of data to look for it. That's the kind of thing that it could do. It's too early to tell right? We've conformed to the GDPR, but I will tell you that from our perspective, the GDPR is the law of the land, and we have fully complied with it, right? So I think we have to operate under the laws of the places that we operate in, and the GDPR, those debates were a long time ago. So we have taken a position of let's make it work, and we're doing that.
I remember when we were together at the EG8, and we flew to Deauville, and we presented the result of the work that has been done by everyone. You were considering that regulation is not what will help growing the business, and the best way to grow the business is to have some of the issues, because you were conscious of the fact that there was issues, be fixed by the machine. Now, when you look 7 years after, do you believe that it's still the case, and that some of the issues can be fixed by the machine rather than by regulation? Because as you know, in Europe, we all believe, not all, many governments believe a lot on regulations.
So I would prefer to solve problems by innovation and competition over regulation. The problem that you get into with regulation in technology is that there tends to be, the regulations tend to benefit the current incumbents in some technology, and they tend to make it difficult for a new idea to come along, because the law is written with what we know, not what we don't know. So whenever there's any rule, and I mean this in general, I always ask myself, well, that makes sense, but what would now not happen as a result of that regulation? And that's my view in Europe, it's my view in the United States, it's my view in China. And so you have to find a balance between, you need some regulation, obviously, but too much regulation really can slow your creativity, slow your entrepreneurship. So I would prefer, in France, let's see if we can get entrepreneurial solutions to most problems. Let's see if we can get young entrepreneurs or existing companies to come up with a new approach and try it rather than have to write the law. That's my general view.
What do you think about the idea that data is the new oil, and that monetization of data should benefit much more to the end user and to the consumer? So if you have my profile, and if you have all the data regarding myself, and you can target me much better, you are selling something which belongs to me. And why shouldn't have a share of the revenue that you are getting?
Well, I've heard this argument.
It's a nice question.
One way to understand your argument is that's an attack on the business models of today's companies, right? Because the way the companies work today is that you use them for free, and they figure out a way to make money with your permission through and consistent with the law and so forth. So I'm perfectly happy to redistribute the money, and that's what taxes are for, that's what regulation is for. But I would be careful about saying, because the data is there, any money made from it should go back to its user. They're already getting a free service. You can certainly give them some money too, but you can think of some other things like pay them in taxes and so forth. So the real value is not the data, but in the industrial construction of the firm, which uses the data to solve a problem, to make money. That's capitalism.
Like the old TV. You get the program for free, and they can advertise with a slight difference, which is that these are much more personal data. So we'll see if somebody will come up with some great idea on that.
And it's important to know that there are companies being founded today that have a very different model of how search will work and Facebook would work and so forth. And so the way you, in my view, going back to my view about competition, is I'd much rather have startups with completely new ways to think about how to use data and so forth, and let's let the market sort it out.
We are back to AI, and yesterday evening I had the opportunity of putting a question to Mark Zuckerberg, and I will put exactly the same question to you. Elon Musk has been not only vocal, but showing a lot of skepticism regarding AI and thinking that AI is not good for the people and that the future based on AI will not be that positive. So maybe you can tell us what you think and if you agree with him, or which respect do you disagree?
So I think that Elon is exactly wrong. So my
clear.
Position is clear. And
So the media are happy here because they have a catch line. They
No.
were asking, why the hell I have not yet my catch line? Now I have one.
And
Eric Schmidt says
Elon is
Elon
wrong.
Musk is wrong.
And he's wrong.
Utterly wrong.
And he's wrong because he doesn't understand the benefits that this technology will provide to making every human being smarter. And the fact of the matter is that AI and machine learning are so fundamentally good for humanity. Let's go through. It makes every citizen smarter, from the best educated to the least. It allows you to live longer with less pain, less disease, right? It allows you to make economic systems and social systems be more fluid, right? Over and over again, making people smarter is a net good. He is concerned about the possible misuse of this technology, and I am too. But today, the overwhelming benefit of this is positive. The example I would offer is you would not invent the telephone because of the possible misuse of the telephone by evil people. No, you would build the telephone and you try to figure out a way to police the misuse of the telephone.
Eric, before we close, based on that question, what would be your recommendation on how to make sure that the people are not left aside or left behind with all the progress of technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc.? What will happen to the people? What can we do in order that they can still have a job, even if they are not, like you, a PhD, if they don't understand all the mathematical aspects and they don't know how to write an algorithm? What should government, private companies do to help our employees, or the people on Earth, to catch up with this new world?
So when I was young, computers were the regime of very specialized people. They were very hard to use, very hard to understand. 20 years later, computers through the Macintosh and Apple and the IBM personal computer ultimately brought us to the iPhone and Android phones that you have today. So we went from very specialized, very hard to understand solutions to very general purpose solutions. And we'll see the same thing with AI, that this technology, which is today the realm of specialists, will become generally useful for humans. Right? So of that I am sure. So at the moment, the best thing the governments can do is assist in the research funding, education, and the development of these new solutions. As they emerge, they will benefit all of us, and I mean the people who think they're in trouble too, because it makes them smarter. So there's a lot of evidence that workers who work in jobs where the job gets more complicated get higher wages if they can be helped, right? If they can be helped to do it. So my argument, and I want to say this very clearly, is that we will not have a material job shortage of people. We'll have a job shortage, we'll have too many open jobs. And the reason is because in Europe and the United States, the societies are getting older. The number of people working is smaller. In order to make those working people be able to pay the taxes and pay for the police and pay for the retirement, you're going to need to make them more productive. The best way to make them productive is to use AI to make them smarter, scalable, quicker, and so forth. So I think that the embracement of AI is net positive for jobs.
So, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you,
You
Maurice.
have shown that there is some optimism. Mesdames et messieurs, Eric Schmidt, merci.
Messieurs, thank you very